If you ever feel threatened, remember to stay put and call for help. All housing units are equipped with emergency landlines. The number for DNR services is 3, 6, and 7. Response times may vary.
Hylophobia, better known as the irrational fear of the woods or the forest, has been a concept that has been a staple in the larger horror genre, with productions like The Ritual, The Blair Witch Project, Hereditary, and The Witch. They have all utilized some form of a woodland backdrop, but specifically in a nighttime setting, all to stir an ancestral fear that is somehow still persistent in the modern day. Because the fear of the known is one thing, and depending on your region, but for me specifically the South, you have your mountain lions, you have your venomous snakes, you have your occasional black bear, and so on. But it's the fear of the unknown. Maybe it's that sinking pit that grows cold in your stomach as you hear leaves crunch behind you. Or maybe it's just the way that your headlamp hit the tree in just the right way to make it seem like something's just hiding out of sight. I think these are fears that we can all relate to. As someone who, out of leisure or out of work, has backcountry camps, there have been moments where I'm sitting in my bivvy and I hear crunching outside of my tent, and for my better judgment, I decide not to go because that's none of my business. Or even worse, I wake up and there's nothing. Complete silence. No birds, no insects chirping, not even wind. Greensboro DNR is a horror national park ARG that I think taps into this feeling in a unique and new way that in a oversaturated area such as analog horror is pretty refreshing. As Greensboro DNR doesn't really try to burn the wick from both ends and try to rush a project out, they take their time in building the lore and the characters surrounding this national park. So today I would like you to join me as we dive into the story and possible theories surrounding the eldritch demons that are coming out of Greensboro National Park. And before we get started, I want to thank the team and the people behind this channel for their ability to commit to such a creative endeavor. And I would also like to thank you, the watcher, for viewing my channel. Greensboro DNR has various different social media accounts. They have a TikTok, Instagram, and for our purposes, a YouTube channel. And this is all spearheaded by the social media manager of the park, where they are uploading various orientation tapes and old kind of educational cartoons that they found in the basement of one of the federal buildings. But with that being said, we go ahead and take a look at the channel, and we see that there are tapes numbered 1 through 31. And obviously there aren't 31 tapes because this would be like an 8-hour video, but we have those tapes plus 4 different children's cartoons that are kind of split among this channel. And although there's no formal watching order, what we do know, and that you'll see here soon, is that there are timestamps that are presented at the beginning of each tape that I will be using to kind of curate a timeline for how the events between each orientation tape happened and a general outline for the history of Greensboro National Park, along with possible theories on what's going on. And as for the children's cartoons, I have places that I decided to put them in just because it made more sense narratively, but we'll get into that soon. Tape 3, or water safety, starts off with, at the time, our 2 unnamed officers that will be with us for the duration of this project. And for the sake of clarity, this is Officer Allen and this is Officer Ryan. Here, they're discussing the various hazards that come along with working at the lake that the future conservation officers of Greensboro DNR should keep an eye out for. From the various species living within the waters of Greensboro to hazards that may appear at the embankments of the lake. But it seems like there is more to these waters, as there is a weird siren call-esque allure that not only traps visitors, as we see, but officers as well, to be consumed by whatever's in the water.
Storm forecasts and aggressive water life.
Be aware of how you feel when you look out into the water. Listen. Looks good to me.
And here we see that Officer Ryan is bringing water over to the table to such a degree that you would think he was handling some form of an incredible acid. Some takeaways from this tape: obviously there's something weird, not only with the force, as we'll get into later, but the waters here at Greensboro. And also, we see that the officers that have been here for a while and are a little bit more seasoned are pretty numb to what's going on here in the park, but also that they're willing to get rid of evidence or bodies that may arise from the work here at the national park. In the benefits and compensation tape, it's, as the name entails, it's basically just an outline of the various benefits that a Greensboro DNR conservation officer would receive as being part of the agency.
The starting salary for a rookie-level conservation officer with no prior experience or knowledge is $65,000 a year, with a $1,000 sign-on bonus. We like to think of ourselves as a people-first family work environment.
We also offer 40 days unpaid vacation. We just suggest that you don't leave during these months here.
You will also be receiving our premium benefits package, which includes the best vision and dental coverage.
We take pride in not offering any health insurance at Greensboro DNR.
Because we are a family, we like to rely on each other. So instead of having a medically trained professional of your choosing, we will have a nurse on site at all times for a discounted price.
And honestly, can I say, for a natural resource job, $65K with a $1,000 sign-on bonus, I would fold like tissue paper. We also see a couple things. Obviously, you have your dental and your vision, but you don't get medical. For some weird reason, they require that you get on-site medical attention, which may show the intentions of the park to keep whatever's going on under tight wraps. Also in this section, they jokingly talk about the fact that you get 40 days of unpaid vacation time. But the weird part from this is we figured out what days you're allowed to take the vacation versus what days you're not allowed to. And during your 40-day unpaid vacation, you're also required to do daily check-ins, and you're not allowed to cross state lines. In the grand scheme of things, that seems pretty benign, but as we get into the theories, you'll start to realize there might be a greater reason why they require officers to take the month of December off. And here we get into the first tape, not only by name, but by publishing date. In the previous tapes, we were told about the dangers that reside within the water of Greensboro, but in this buddy system tape, we'll be told about the different protocols that will be life-saving when venturing into the woods of the national park. And here they introduce the buddy system, which basically means you do not go out into the forest by yourself, and based on the success rate of the buddy system versus the non-buddy system, it seems like you're kind of cooked either way. And along with the buddy system, we also have another protocol called the PRS, or the Personal Response Sheet.
When you're looking for your partner, please be cautious. Please refer to your Personal Response Sheet, or PRS, to make sure they are who they say they are.
And this is a document that you create that, with a minimum of 5 security questions, is used to counteract any buddy, or better yet, anything that may be trying to fake its identity in order to weaken your guard. And it says that for this sheet, your buddy is required to score 100% or 80% with a blood test in order to be considered safe. We're also told in this same situation that if you don't make it back before curfew,
Rangers who do not return to the station at the appropriate time are considered DOA, and their records will be expunged.
and some other minor notes is that there is a bit between Officer Allen and Officer Allen where this happens.
Say they are. We don't want any incidents like the one, right?
And it seems like Officer Ryan is not too keen on the jokes that Officer Allen made, which is strange because based on their interactions, you would think that they would know each other pretty well, but yeah. And there's also like a little info thing that is dropped where a officer by the name of Preston Ellis was the world question holder for 3,636 questions asked during the PRS, which Preston will be a person we'll come back to later in this series, so I'd like you to just kind of hold on to that name. And then following the end of this tape, we get a cut where they kind of do a live representation of what a PRS questionnaire would look like, where we see Officer Ryan is the proctor and Officer Allen is being interrogated. And this happens.
Now, we're going to show you a standard PRS exercise. Alright, what's your favorite color?
Blue.
And what's your first car model?
91 Thunderbird.
And are you left or right-handed?
Right-handed.
What happened on January 1st?
Search and Rescue is a department that I feel like most of us are familiar with within federal parks, the acronym being SAR. Well, Greensboro has its own version of that, where the search and recover protocol seems to be more of an effort to suppress the media and family coverage of the missing persons that go on within the park system. Where during the suppression in the background, the SRP spent about 30 days looking for the individual. And here is where we actually find quite a few things on like how the entities of the park that we'll get into have their effects on the actual officers themselves, where we see a example of officers going what the park calls critical.
The forest is filled with amazing things, but some things are too amazing and may end up confusing your brain.
The likelihood of you seeing something you want to forget is quite high.
It's not uncommon for officers to go critical while searching Greensboro National Forest.
That's why it's important to keep your mental well-being in mind.
And immediately you may wonder what ethereal beings must be out there for the employees of the park to go critical, or for, us being clear, crazy. Well, we get our answer immediately when we get a gliding shot of what they call an SPR binder. And here we get some haunting names in the binder, like the Unusual Silence, the Frog, Nature Man, Quicksand, Hollow, Repetitive Trees, Irregular, Civilization, and one that's just called Hole, which is a bit concerning. We also have things like Abyss Encounter, Ritual Encounter, /clearance, and landmines. And outside of the otherworldly entities that you may encounter whenever you're doing a search and recover mission, you also get redirected to your buddy, the person that's going to be with you whenever shit hits the fan. And it gets to this iconic photo of Teddy Roosevelt and a lesser-known person that some of you may not know, John Muir, which, if you're not familiar, he's a huge naturalist that is kind of a major talking point and a major head within the natural resource field. But his face is kind of scribbled out, and I actually asked about this in one of the comments of the video, and I got a vague response, and I'm not quite sure on whether or not they are just referencing what happened in the real world, where he went temporarily blind from getting, I think, shrapnel shot into his eye, and then later died of, I believe, cancer. I could be wrong. I'll put somewhere up here if I'm incorrect about that. But yeah, so weird circumstances. Which leads us into the protocol in which if you and your buddy are required to go into various sections where you're going to be out of sight with your buddy, kind of like if you're going cave diving or if you're going into the abyss or the hole, you're required to tether to your buddy. And in this orientation, we actually get our first sights into the various interactive questions that we'll be playing for the rest of this tape. And although the questions seem pretty benign, there is this specific question that happens here that kind of raises an eyebrow. So when this clip happened, it seemed like there was 3 taps at the beginning, followed by 6 sequential taps after. And so my first thought was some form of Morse code or some form of a tapping code. And obviously, because of this, I tried to insert the code into a Morse code cipher. I got nothing. I continued to look, and I eventually found a Vietnamese tapping code, and I tried that. But then I realized that the Vietnamese tapping code is a 5x5 grid that I'll insert somewhere over here, and realized that the 6 taps probably won't correlate to it. So I'm still not sure what exactly this tapping could be. It could just be for the sake of creating like some ambiance or whatever, or some type of like uneasy feeling. But if you have any thoughts on what it could be, I would love for y'all to leave a comment below. And so as we close out the tape, we go into what the protocol is for a post search would look like. And it seems like after the 30-day period, you consider these people completely missing or dead. And the only issue with that is if another officer or a fellow visitor finds the body of the person that was missing, you are iced out of the park. We also learned that if you lose your buddy during this process, you become a priority 1 suspect, where the agency basically makes your life a living hell. And now we're going to switch the pace a little bit. As I mentioned before, there were orientation tapes that were found in a basement by the social media manager. And we also found that there were children's cartoons. It seems that the collection of these cartoons, similar to the animation style of Amanda the Adventurer, were used to kind of groom the children of the newly established officers into joining or being a part of the park system. And that leads us into Boro, who is genuinely one of my favorite parts of this entire series, because I mean, just look at this guy. And we learn that he is the son of 2 newly established Greensboro officers. And can I say, we are introduced to some of the most benign but hauntingly sad lines that comes out of the series.
Our family will be relocating to our park. Remember to tell all your friends goodbye. You will not be seeing them again.
So Boro and his family leave their former lives and friends behind to greener burrows. But we see that whenever they make it to their new housing, Boro's mother immediately gets a call to kind of go on her first shift, just leaving Boro and his dad to deal with a newly established visitor that would be coming to their house soon. And here we get to witness some of the most horrific events that would happen from the perspective of Boro.
The best policy is to stay indoors, no matter what. Family members who are not on Greensboro DNR payroll have no reason to enter Greensboro National Forest. That means you, Boro. While living in Greensboro National Forest, emotions like curiosity and paranoia should be ignored. If you ever feel threatened, remember to stay put and call for help. All housing units are equipped with emergency landlines. The number for DNR services is 3, 6, and 7. Response times may vary. In high-stress situations, you need to remain calm. Everything in the forest can smell your fear. When interacting with local wildlife, it's important to determine the aggression level of the animal. Listen for territorial noises such as huffing or growling. Observe how they move and take an educated guess on what their top speed might be. It's best to assume there are no peaceful creatures in Greensboro National Forest. If a creature begins to display a high level of intelligence, find a way out as soon as possible. This could be the difference between life and death.
367 DNR emergency, returning your call. Are you safe and able to speak right now? Ah, I see. Help is on the way.
On the way.
When all hope seems lost,
Help is on the way.
there's nothing wrong with playing dead.
Help is on the way. Help is on the way. Help is on the way. Help. 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 Are you safe and able to speak right now? 367 DNR emergency, returning your call.
If this is the end, close your eyes and pretend to be somewhere else.
Yeah, so not only do they have the modern depiction of Wendigos at this park, they also have an incredible sound design in this scene, and they also do my boy Burrow so dirty in this scene. But following Burrow's mom being able to save the day, we see a collection of what I'm assuming to be park employees in hazmat suits cleaning up the scene and taking the body of the Wendigo away, while also giving such a sad symbolism of Burrow's dad being taken away by the Wendigos in the presentation of Burrow's dad's hat being given to Burrow. Now, it seems that Burrow's first evening at the park was pretty eventful, but it couldn't possibly get worse, right? And sadly not. In this two-part adventure, we actually get to learn quite a bit on what it is like to be a kid within the Greensboro DNR system. First, we learn that all the children go to a school called DACR Academy, where it seemingly is outside of the Greensboro City District, and we're introduced to a plethora of different characters, with my personal being this little tweaker that is in the corner of the shots that we'll see throughout this part. So Burrow gets his school schedule, and we first go to Dr. Croc's environmental science class, where when we take a look at the whiteboard, we see quite a few strange things, like to never forget your compass, which, for the sake of a person that works at a park, makes sense. And it's not depicted like typical compasses where you would have north pointing up. It seems to be turned on its right, where we have west pointing. We also start to see cult-like actions happening within the DNR system, where questions are condemned and shunned. And after the environmental science class, Burrow gets to go to his lunch, where we see the glorious mascot of DACR Academy, which is a biblically accurate angel. And we also get to see that another cult-like action where your social status within this system dictates not only where you stand among your peers, but also what you eat. And Burrow, being the sweet summer child that he is, decides to share his cookie with the tweaker at his lunch table, along with some note that, although I've tried to zoom in and clarify, I cannot read. So it probably is not that important. And hereafter, we see that Burrow's offering was rejected by the tweaker, and we also get to see where a lot of these students reside within the social hierarchy. And now we get into part 2, where, can I just say, reading the description of this part 2, the publisher just immediately blasts Burrow, and I'm not here for it. And as we move on to Burrow's schedule, we see that his next activity is PE, where as he's walking to figure out where he wants to be, he passes by a early officer's table and looks into the woods.
You try your hand at some martial arts sparring. Or perhaps you would prefer the Young Officers Adventure Club. That's okay, Boro.
So after Burrow's PTSD, we see that he meets a friend, a platypus, where, they're just trying to be like kids and play. And because obviously having fun is not allowed at this academy, the coach cuts their tetherball string and pushes them onto what looks like to be a track. We also get another view of what impacts your social standing, which is the Fitness Gram Pacer test, where we see both the platypus friend and Burrow struggling on the track. And in a heartbreaking turn of events, whenever they are taking their test, Burrow sees that his platypus friend falls. And instead of trying to go up and help him, because we saw that that was shunned, Burrow completes his test, climbs up his social ladder, but as he turns, the platypus is gone. After PE, Burrow goes to the west wing of the school to attend Art 101, where we see it's a pretty rough section of the school, and the narrator states that it's rough because this section of the school was being built whenever the construction funding for it was at the bottom of the barrel. It seems that the academy uses Art 101 to see if students have some form of independence, and which, if they do, as the narrator says,
Decker Academy is a forward-thinking school, and classes in the West Wing are part of an ongoing experiment to see how well students react to independence. Hold on. What do you think you're doing? Don't you know that drawing is for babies? What would your friends think about that? We'll let you off the hook this time, Boro, but you need to be more careful. When you take classes in the West Wing, it's normal to start feeling tired. No one will blame you for catching up on some beauty sleep. In fact, your friends might think you're even cooler.
And as Burrow wakes up, he looks around and he realizes that his school is unoccupied. And so he walks down the hall. When we see that Burrow walks down to the hall, we take a look at one of the clocks that are shown, and it seems like the time is 3:01, which means that at the end of PE, which was 2:45, all hell for this section broke loose in like 15 minutes. And when Burrow walks into the bloody bathroom, he realizes what happened in Shibuya. During the chase sequence, there are some events that happen that raise an eyebrow, and one of these being that the room that they started out in had a one-way panel with a chair, meaning that someone was watching these students. Following the chase, we see that the hare's aggression was quelled whenever Burroughs showed the hare a photo of him and his family that he drew, which is followed by the narrator immediately demeaning Burrow and telling him that he is basically a waste of space because he showed some form of individualism, and he shoots to the bottom of the rank along with the wolf. where on the bottom we also see what may have happened to the other students that were in that classroom. And the end of the tape shows a wholesome moment between the wolf and Boro, where they're exchanging photos of them and their families. And in this, we also see that the wolf has a possibly rough home life where the mom is not necessarily happy in the drawing that he depicts, showing the sad realization and reminder that children sometimes aren't aware of the social standings that are at home. Okay, so now we're actually back to the tapes for a bit, where this is slightly different from the other tapes, as this orientation tape was not found in the basement with the others. And I would say that this upload is actually one of the larger foundational clips to figuring out what exactly is happening at the national park. In the bears tape, we find out that bear attacks in the park actually started in August 2nd of 1899. Along with spontaneous combustions and various bodies that were found at a gorge within the park. Officer Allen and Officer Ryan detail on how these bear attacks aren't necessarily bears, but it's just a form of ranking for the various wildlife that reside within the park. In level 1, we start with panda bears, and these are your avoidance species. You can think of squirrels, deer, and frogs. And then we move on to level 2, which is black bears, things that won't necessarily attack humans on sight, but if put into a corner, they will. You can think of mountain lions, black bears, and other carnivorous species. And here we're also given a graph that shows spikes within the various bear attacks within a time period, mainly being in 1939 and 1940. The officers also outline some areas in which you probably shouldn't go out of your way to interact with if you're dealing with anything that is a level 2 and above. And now we move on to level 3, which are grizzly bears. And here, this level consists of things that will attack you and that an officer will need to resort to looking at their SRP binder in order to figure out how to deal with them. And here we get a weird event where Officer Ryan is trying to detail and trying to explain exactly on how to deal with a specific type of entity in this level, but is cut and also dismissed by Officer Allen.
If you find a grizzly category creature, you will also run into the...
But that's a lesson for another day.
We also see that Officer Allen is pretty spiteful of the different entities that reside within this park, something that is not reciprocated by Officer Allen. Here we also see that the orientation tape was recorded over by whoever sent this, in which they played a program called Greensboro's Perspective. And here the host is covering a story that was leaked by the media where 3 individuals were, we'll say they were Christmas ornaments within the park. And I would show that, but then this video would be smite into oblivion. So if you want to go see that, I would go ahead and take a look at your own time. But you can go take a look and then come back here. And somehow they were able to get Officer Ryan on for questioning, and where Officer Ryan basically spent the greater part of his interview basically just rage baiting the interviewer the entire time. And now we cut back to the train tape where we cover level 4, which is polar bears. And we learn that there's not much that is known about this level, but the DNR rewards handsomely for any information that is found by officers in this section. And following this, the filming of the actual orient tape is cut, but the camera is still rolling, and we get to hear a conversation between Officer Ryan and Officer Allen that leaves you scratching your head.
Hey, we're not asking rookies to go after level 4 bears.
Well, we are. It's one of the new initiatives.
What new initiatives?
The one admin just started. We need more data for when expeditions start back up. They didn't tell you? We've been moving in that direction for a while.
I remember we agreed that was a bad idea.
I guess I changed my mind.
You've been doing that a lot.
I'm just open-minded. I will warn you, though, that if you have any plans of defying the new orders, you will be reported to the PAD.
You're sick.
I don't care.
It seems like the higher up at Greensboro want to reopen what were called expeditions, and what this means exactly is still unknown. But from what we're able to gather between the conversation, it seems like everybody who goes on these expeditions don't always make it back to the park offices. And the discussion gets so heated that Officer Allen threatens to report Officer Ryan to something called the PAD, which we're not sure what this means exactly, but obviously it can't be that good if it's being used as a threat. Here, the tape comes to an end, and before the actual upload ends, there's a bit of a glitch, and we come to the revelation that there's actually one more level. Level 5, Dire Bears. Alright, and for the next two tapes, I'll be condensing it into one part, as I think the two tapes don't have enough information to be their own section. But yeah, for tape 4, we see that there is a infomercial for a Greensboro fanny pack, which comes with a whole host of different items, ranging anywhere from 6+ compasses to a compound bow. And now tape 10, which is media training, is a bit of a different story. Although this section was primarily used to teach new recruits how to run laps around reporters, this section I feel like was mainly used to drop nuggets of information here and there about the general lore around the park. Here we get some new missing people. We get Michael McCullen, we get Officer Bradley, and we get Fletcher Cummings. But the biggest bit of info we get is about how officers are ranked within the DNR system, which is similar to the Boy Scout ranking. Here we find out that Officer Allen actually outranks Ryan, and that there is a mystery individual that is ranked Eagle. And this guy is just filled out with a static blob, which will be interesting once we see what exactly this might mean. The video ends with us learning that DNR, if you're not able to shake reporters or the media, is able to provide employees with fake IDs and false names, and is able to make these reporters disappear. Tape 31, or Halloween, is very different from the other tapes that we've been given, as this one comes with a warning label before we're even able to actually see the tape. And following this, we actually get to learn about the history of Halloween of this alternate reality.
What my friend means to say is that Halloween is a dangerous time for DNR officers. And since this is your first Halloween, we'd like to explain to you how things are different around here.
While children have a great night tricking and treating, Greensboro DNR is forced to suffer.
On October 31st, 1882, a disgruntled witch completed her ritual.
We learn via Officer Allen and Officer Ryan that during the night of Halloween, officers are required to endure a 12-hour onslaught in which you're supposed to use candy-like ammunition against the various entities within the park. And this is learned because back in 1882, an officer by the name of James McCoy was unfortunately taken out by one of these entities, but in this process, we learned that through his licorice-eating habits, candy somehow was able to take out these entities. So we have the train tape, which I will call Plot A during this video, but in Plot B, we actually get a cut where it is a recording of GBTV, where they do a coverage of a Greensboro DNR whistleblower, and kind of also a Halloween festival type deal within the Century Square. And this whistleblower may be somebody that we talked about before.
Increase in Halloween-related media, the position of costume scouter was created.
I've been working as a costume scouter for about 8 years now. Back in the day, the only creatures you really had to deal with were sheet ghosts, vampires, an occasional Frankenstein, and maybe a few ghouls.
But during GPT's broadcast, we actually learned about the haunting results of being a whistleblower against the park, with a missing poster presenting Preston's face, but also Preston's face being kind of overlaid over several tombstones.
Claims that something very sinister appears deep in the woods on Halloween night. Viewer discretion.
We also realize that Preston isn't the only unfortunate officer to meet his end during this night as well. We end this tape collection with another Boro cartoon, but covering the same topic of the previous tape, Halloween. This episode starts with us seeing Boro at a memorial wall at the town square of Greensboro, most likely visiting his dad's plaque. And here we see that the narrator begins to fully explain the history of Halloween.
Would you like to know how Halloween first began, Boro? Halloween first began 2,000 years ago when some Celtic villagers got together to celebrate the end of the harvest season. During their celebration, some Halloween pranksters thought it would be a funny idea to try and summon the demon Karzula with a sacrificial goat. Luckily, Karzula was unable to materialize in its mortal form, so instead cursed the village with an insatiable hunger. All villagers began to attack and consume one another, sometimes while they were still alive. All except for the wise village elder, who had been fasting for years beforehand. To stop the curse, the village elder gouged his eyes out with a pumpkin stem while chanting an ancient mantra. This stopped the night of hunger, but the elder was too late. Not one villager had survived.
And in the Greensboro world, we see that Halloween is not attached to Samhain, but is attached to a demon that, although it is hard to hear the exact name because of the weird gurgle that we hear, I believe said Corson, who is listed as one of the 4 principal kings listed in the Lesser Key of Solomon, being the cardinal spirit of the West. And from what I could find, it seems like this demon can only be summoned on great occasion. And for Halloween being an homage to the great and final harvest, could be a possibility of when he was summoned or why he was summoned. But the narrator falls on what happened after his summoning, and it didn't go too well. And here, the narrator transitions back to helping Boro try to find a Halloween costume, where, weirdly enough, he tries to stir Boro away from doing a scary or frightening Halloween costume.
Boro, you're not thinking about wearing a scary costume, are you? You'll never get any candy wearing something like that. Everyone already wears scary costumes. If you really want to stand out, you need to find something a little more subtle. Don't worry, we already have some great costumes lined up. You could be a restaurant waiter, a bear mauling survivor, or maybe even an accountant.
And after finding the fit, Burrow goes out to the streets in order to start the festivities, where he's pulled up on by a car that proceeds to extend out the grossest hand I've ever seen and throw candy at his body. And then immediately runs down a child. And we get back to the narrator where he's teaching Burrow, and i.e. the children in extension, to hide scary Halloween costumes whenever they're left unattended. And get just trying to get rid of them by any means necessary, throwing them away, burying them underneath the ground, and so on. Which is obviously a bit strange, but in conjunction with choosing a non-scary Halloween costume, we'll understand why the narrator is pointing Burrow in this direction in a second. The narrator later states that there is a town-wide curfew that all Halloween festivities were to end between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., which, funny enough, is also the time period in which officers are supposed to go out for the entity onslaught, and also tells Burrow to avoid the woods. And we'll see why right here.
Let's witness all these accounts. Everyone must buy finance. That doesn't add up. Let's double check the numbers.
Now, the full story behind Greensboro DNR is not complete as of now. But I think there's enough information that we can gather to at least set a baseline that myself or others can build off of at a later date. So we know that on Halloween night of 1882, that there was a ritual completed by a witch. And although we don't know exactly what ritual was completed, the only ritual that we were introduced to was the one that was stated out in the Halloween special. So it'd be safe to assume that the witch conducted a similar ritual, but unlike the Celtic times of 2,000 years ago, I think this time it was completed. So now, for y'all to follow me going forward, we need to kind of break down the Lesser Key of Solomon. And now, for those who don't know what the Lesser Key of Solomon is, it's essentially just a grimoire that was established back in the mid-17th century that has an unknown author. And you may be familiar with one of the demons that was mentioned in it, Paimon, the main antagonist for the movie Hereditary. But specifically in the Lesser Key, we're going to be looking at the first of the 5 books, Aris Goisha. And I probably completely slaughtered the pronunciation, but yeah, we're just going to have to ride with it. And the reason for pointing out this section, well, the Latin term Goisha literally refers to the evocation or the summoning of demons and evil spirits. But Corson, or what I believe to be Corson, is, like I said earlier, the principal king, but towards the cardinal direction of the west. And now, from what I was able to find, Corson doesn't necessarily have, for lack of a better term, a power set, but we do know, based on the Lesser Key of Solomon, that he does command a legion of demons, and for the sake of looking into the history of Greensboro, is able to kind of summon or bestow curses upon people. So not only do I believe that the witch was able to fully summon Corson, but Corson also brought several evil spirits and curses along with him. Everything ranging from the Wendigos to the weird staticky faces and the cannibalistic reaction we see from the hare and the Boro cartoon. And so when you start to look at the series through this lens, all the odd pieces start to make a little bit more sense. You have the weird fascination with the compasses within the park system, giving out way more than any normal person would ever need. Then you have the Western cardinal direction being emphasized within the school system. I mean, Mr. Croc's whiteboard that had the compass that was weirdly pointing west, and then the dilapidated western wing of the school, which seems to be a weird testing ground, but we'll get into that in a second as I discuss my theories around what the school means. And then when you start to think about the mascot of the actual school as well, having a mascot being an angel against what would be a substantial demon kind of starts to make sense as well. Which, while we're on the topic of Dacker Academy, what exactly is the point of this school? Well, we do know that the primary purpose of this academy is to groom students of the newly established officers to stay within the park system in order to be used as some form of cannon fodder or be able to use as an army against the various entities that are in the park system. And they do this by utilizing cult-like tools in order to keep these children in the system. And some of these key tools used in cult-like settings include separating individuals from friends or family, remaking identities to suit the group, in this case by dismissing individualism and providing a social ranking system that is dictated by who follows orders of DNR the best. But the one aspect of the school that I want to cover is the West Wing and what its real intentions are. I believe that this West Wing is actually a testing facility to see if there are students that are able to be resistant to the cannibalistic curses that are instilled by Corson. And based on what we know with Corson, or whatever demon this is, he's able to inflict curses that cause people to have cannibalistic hunger, kind of similar to the aggro state with the hair. It may be a possibility that the higher-ups are watching the abilities and resistances of these students through the one-way window that we saw in the Burrow cartoon. So possibly making soldiers that are resistant to the demon's afflictions. But like I said, this is all just a theory. I could be horrifically wrong. I probably am. But it's just a fun little mind experiment on what everything could possibly mean. And some other tidbits I want to cover as well is some of the entities, and then also Officer Allen. So first off, we have our entities that we have seen so far, which one being the Wendigo, which I feel like everybody's kind of familiar with. But the one I want to cover is the static faceless guy. These entities, I believe, are the reasons why the narrator tends to avoid having the students at Greensboro wear scary Halloween costumes during Halloween night. As we see in the cartoon, the static entity mimics whatever they come into almost perfectly, because as you see, the static entity that ran into Boro, which was underneath a stump, which, funny enough, is similar to the stump in the other tape where they were talking about places to avoid when interacting with bears, the bear tape. Yep. We see that it mimics Boro's accountant outfit until he gets peppered with candy and then melts into the ground. I'm assuming that the reason why they're trying to keep the Greensboro students away from scary Halloween costumes is because the scarier the monster is, the harder it is to take out the faceless entity. And the second being Officer Allen. I don't trust that motherfucker. The jovial manner in which he talks about how officers have died in the past and his nonchalant attitude at the end of Bears, something is just off. But the biggest nail in the coffin is whenever he couldn't answer the question during the personal response sheet at the end of tape 1. I think Officer Allen was replaced by one of those faceless static entities because it makes sense that he'd be able to replicate an officer perfectly, but obviously the personal response sheet was being used as a counter for these entities. So whenever he was asked a question, the entity wasn't able to replicate memories, leading to him not being able to, answer the question. And if we look at the timeline, it makes sense. I mean, tape 1 takes place in February, and we know that the question that Officer Ryan asked took place sometime at the beginning of January, specifically probably January 1st, where there was such a traumatic event that probably led to a lot of people dying or going missing, and probably where the original Officer Allen was replaced by this static figure, which makes sense because if we look back at the tape of Bears, we also realize that Officer Ryan kind of starts to realize that Officer Allen is not the same person that he was before. With all this being said, there are some holes that haven't been filled yet, like what entities reside within level 5 Dire Bear, because if the static guy is a level 4 or a level 3, level 5 has got to be like Cthulhu or an SMP character or something similar to that. Other things like what is the PAD and what is the 100 Division still haven't been answered yet, or they may have and I just have missed it. I'm not quite sure. If you have any thoughts or opinions on what those could be, I would love to hear them in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. And I'll see you on the flip side.